My name is Clara. I'm 27 years old. 4 months ago, I was still living in a mansion of over 13,000 square feet in the suburbs of Nashville. The place I thought would be my forever home. But then my parents, Mr. Dennis and Mrs. Lorraine, along with my sister Brooke, took everything from me. Not just the house, not just the company, but the last ounce of trust I had left for my family. My grandfather, Mr. Harold Lexley, was the only one who truly saw me. He was the man who built Lexington Timber Group, the largest lumber company in Tennessee, from nothing. I was the granddaughter he taught to read financial statements at 14, the one he brought to shareholder meetings to build backbone. On the other hand, Brooke, 30 years old, beautiful, glamorous, never showed interest in anything beyond her platinum credit card and a shallow social circle in Dallas. But in my parents' eyes, she was always the perfect daughter. They didn't even try to hide their favoritism. Every time Brooke messed up, a broken contract, credit card debt, gambling rumors, they'd blame social pressure and pour money into cleaning up the mess. And me? I once helped the company land a deal worth $2.8 million and only got a half-hearted nod from my father. Not bad. Grandpa Harold passed away earlier this year after 6 months battling cancer. In his final days, he never left his bed. And I, as usual, was the one brewing his morning coffee, taking down every instruction, every matter he wanted to settle. "After I'm gone, you'll see who they really are," he told me one rainy afternoon, his eyes dim but his voice steady. "But you won't walk away empty-handed." I didn't think much of it until the reading of the will. The meeting was held at the office of attorney Samuel Whitaker, my grandfather's legal representative for nearly 2 decades. I arrived 10 minutes early, not wanting to see Brooke's fake face. When Mr. Whitaker began to read, the air in the room turned to stone. According to the wishes of Mr. Harold Denton, all executive shares of Lexington Timber Group and ownership of the Bell River estate will be transferred to his granddaughter, Clara Denton. I heard a wineglass clatter against the table. My mother, Lorraine, gripped the armrest, her face pale. My father said nothing, but his jaw tightened, as if he could crush the air itself. Brooke burst into tears. But it wasn't grief, it was rage! She jumped to her feet, screaming. What? He left everything to her? What did she even do? Make coffee and jot down notes a few times and suddenly she gets the whole company? My father finally spoke, his voice chillingly calm. "I think we need to reassess the legal validity of this document." I wasn't surprised. But I wasn't ready for the scale of betrayal that followed. 3 weeks later, I was thrown out of the very house my grandfather left me. They hired a separate lawyer, submitted a bundle of medical evaluations to court, claiming Grandpa Harold was no longer mentally sound when revising the will. I objected. I presented the evaluation from his personal doctor, confirming he was lucid until the end. No one listened. One Monday morning while I was having breakfast in the kitchen, Peterson, the longtime house manager, approached me and whispered, "They want you out of the house by noon, Miss Clara." I laughed. "They can't do that, this is my house." But I was wrong. At exactly 11:45 a.m., my father walked into my room without knocking. Behind him was Brooke, smiling triumphantly, and 2 strange men in gray suits. "Get up," he said, "your sister needs this room." I didn't move. And then, without warning, he grabbed my arm, yanked me out of the chair, and dragged me down the hallway with a strength I never imagined he had. Brooke stood by, unblinking. My mother opened the front door, silent. My suitcase, the only one I had time to pack, was thrown onto the stone steps. I slipped, hit my head on the edge. Blood trickling down my forehead. My father spoke like he was wrapping up a board meeting. "You have no rights here anymore. All assets are under review. Leave before I call the police." I stood up. Blood and tears mixed. I sat curled up at the bus stop nearly a mile from the estate. My coat was soaked, my hair tangled, my hands bruised from resisting my father's shove. No one stopped. No one offered to call a cab. In a wealthy neighborhood like Riverstone Hollow, people don't help someone who looks like they've just been thrown out of a house, even if that person is a Denton daughter. I turned on my phone. My bank account had less than $200 left. All my credit cards were supplementary, under my mother's name, and it looked like they'd been canceled that very morning. I texted the only person I trusted, Jenna, my high school friend, now a nurse at a clinic in East Nashville. I just got kicked out. I need a place to crash for a few days. I'm serious. I'm not joking. 10 minutes later she arrived. She didn't ask questions, just unlocked the car and let me sit in silence. She waited until I spoke first, then gently asked, "What did they do to you?" I answered slowly, like each word was pulling loose a part of me. My dad pulled my hair, my mom watched, and Brooke just smiled. I always thought my family was cold, but I never imagined they'd treat me like a stranger. Like something to be discarded. Jenna didn't ask anything else. She took me to her 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a modest but cozy complex. I slept almost 12 hours straight, only waking once in the night to the wind whistling through the window and a familiar nightmare. Brooke's mocking laugh. And my mother's contemptuous stare. Looking back, everything had been programmed from the start. When I was little, I once asked my mom why only Brooke got to take ballet lessons while I had to go to math tutoring. She chuckled softly and said, "Because your brain works with numbers. Brooke, she needs softer things." I didn't know what softer meant. Because even after Brooke quit 3 dance classes and dropped out of 2 piano courses, my mom still called her full of potential. Me, I won a statewide math competition in 9th grade. And my dad just said, "Don't all students do well in math?" When I got to college I received a full scholarship from Northwestern, but my mom would whisper to her friends that I probably got it for being a woman in a dry field. Meanwhile, Brooke attended a private school in Florida, changed majors 4 times, and was even suspended for cheating. But my parents still threw her a party every time she decided to start fresh. Even in the smallest things, the difference was always there. On my 18th birthday, I got a leather wallet and a card that read, "Good luck in college." On Brooke's birthday, a brand new Jeep and a luxury hotel party. My mother even hired a photographer for family portraits. I wasn't invited. Grandpa Harold was the only one who never made me feel extra. He told me I was the only one in the family who knew how to listen, challenge, and ask why, instead of just nodding. Every weekend I came home, he'd spend hours reading a chapter of a business strategy book with me, or reviewing the company's balance sheets. "You've got a mind for leadership," he told me when I was 19, the first time I went with him to an economic conference in Atlanta. "And Brooke's got a mind?" For picking out Gucci shoes." He meant it as a joke. But now, I realize, it was brutally true. My parents knew he spent more time with me. They didn't like it, but they didn't dare interfere. Not until he got sick. After Grandpa Harold was diagnosed with cancer, Brooke started showing up at the estate more often. She wore pale-colored clothes, always had a soft scarf, and acted mournful like she was his closest companion. But I knew she was playing a part. Because after each 10-minute visit to his room, she'd come out, scroll through her phone, and ask the chef, "Is there anything that's not so bland? I'm tired of all this diet food." During Grandpa's final days, I stayed almost non-stop. He held my hand and whispered, "Don't trust what's written on paper. They can rewrite everything, but they can't erase the memory of those who truly saw it." I didn't understand what he meant at the time. But now, after being dragged out of my home by my own father like I was a stranger, I know he had already seen it all coming. And I've also begun to understand why all these years I was never allowed to win. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because they never wanted me to exist as an heir. The morning of the 3rd Tuesday after I was thrown out of the estate, Jenna left a cup of coffee and a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter. "Morning shift, milk's in the fridge, I left the spare key on the shelf." I quietly sent a thank you text, then walked back into the room, where I'd shoved everything I had left into one corner after the expulsion. A torn suitcase, 2 sets of clothes, a pair of muddy shoes, and one final object that made me collapse to the floor the moment I saw it. A gold pocket watch. I'd stuffed it into my coat pocket in the chaos of leaving. At the time, I'd only thought of it as something Grandpa Harold had cherished, something to hold on to. But now, holding it in my hand, something felt off. The back of the watch was slightly loose, as if it had once been opened and shut carelessly. I held it closer to the light. There was a faint groove, almost invisible unless viewed from an angle. I grabbed a small sewing kit knife Jenna kept and gently traced along the seam. A soft click. The back panel slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. My heart thudded. A small black USB drive, no bigger than a pinky tip, taped neatly inside. Alongside it, a folded slip of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grandpa's. Clara, if you're reading this, the worst has happened. They betrayed you. But you won't fight alone. Find Mr. Richard, his number and address are on the back. He'll know what to do. My hand shook as I peeled the tape off the USB, laid it gently on the table, then flipped over the note. The address was in northern Franklin, about a 40-minute drive from Nashville, with a handwritten landline number, 61584233382. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but I knew one thing. If Grandpa Harold left a USB and named someone called Richard, it wasn't random. I called. 3 rings. Then an older man's voice, steady and measured. This is Richard. I swallowed hard. Are you Richard Bennett? I'm Clara Denton, Harold's granddaughter. Silence. A few seconds. Then, so, you found the watch, huh? I froze. What do you mean? Harold said you were smart and tough, but he wasn't sure if you'd have the nerve to open the back. I gripped the phone, my voice low. I didn't really have a choice, they took everything. A deep sigh. I know. Get in the car, meet me at the address, bring the USB, and tell no one. The house was a restored farmhouse in the middle of an open oak field. No name on the gate, no security cameras, just a brass bell hanging on a wooden frame. I rang. A man in his 60s, silver hair, wearing a checkered shirt and khakis, opened the door. Clara? He nodded. Come in. He led me down a long hallway, into a modest but warm living room. There, a laptop was already open, USB slot ready. I handed him the drive. He plugged it in. Several folders popped up. Medical records, recordings, will_backup, bank info, confidential. The screen brightened. Without a word, Richard clicked a video file. Grandpa Harold appeared. Thinner, nearly all gray, but with sharp eyes, and a steady voice. If someone other than Clara is watching this, know that violating my will is a criminal act. Clara is the sole rightful heir to Lexington Timber Group. My fingers clenched around the chair. My pulse raced. Richard turned to me. This drive has everything. The original will Harold signed in front of 3 neutral witnesses. A mental health assessment from his private doctor confirming he was fully competent. And hours of audio recordings Harold secretly made, including ones where your parents and Brooke discussed adjusting the documents. My mouth opened, but no words came. That's not all, he continued. There's also data on 3 offshore accounts, each with nearly $500,000. All authorized under your name. Harold called it the survival fund. I staggered back, stunned. Where would he go this far? Because he knew they were never going to let you win. I stared at the screen. Grandpa's image frozen in that final frame, looking straight at me. Clara, if you're watching this, then fight. And don't go soft. I took a long, trembling breath. If this was what he left behind, then I wasn't letting it go to waste. 3 days after the meeting with Mr. Richard, I returned to Nashville in silence. My hand gripped the USB stick, like it was the only weapon I had left. I couldn't go public with anything, yet. Every step had to be calculated. Mr. Richard had emphasized that. Don't strike when you're cornered, strike when they least expect it. I rented a small room near the Hermitage Industrial Zone, where no one had heard the Denton name. There, under the yellow glow of a desk lamp, I combed through every folder on the USB, like peeling back the layers of masks my family had worn for years. One audio file stopped me cold. My father's voice. Cold, sharp, speaking on the phone to someone. As long as the doctor signs off that he's mentally unfit, Gregory will handle the rest. Gregory. They had even pulled the family's private lawyer into this dirty game. In another clip, Brooke giggled. If Clara ever found out about those offshore accounts, she'd probably pass out. They knew. They knew Grandpa had prepared, and they were a step ahead. I opened a new email account and sent digital copies of the documents to one person. Benjamin Stokes, a retired inheritance attorney and former law school friend of Mr. Richard. He still took on special cases. We had an appointment next week. But before going any further, I had to be sure. Was there anything else hidden in Grandpa's house? I needed to go back to Bell River Estate. That Friday evening, I drove up the long road to the Denton property. The black iron gate had a new code, new cameras. I didn't go in. I waited. And just as I'd predicted, the family's black SUV rolled out around 7 p.m. Dinner out every weekend, an old tradition, kept more for show than love. I slipped through the back fence, where Grandpa once secretly showed me when I was 15. Just in case you lose your keys and don't want to explain it to anyone. The west cellar door was just as I remembered. No one remembered it existed, tucked away in the old wine storage building Grandpa used. I stepped in. Didn't turn on the lights. Just used my phone's flashlight. And I realized I was too late. Grandpa's study had been stripped. Shelves empty, desk drawers pulled out. The safe door left wide open, fresh dust still scattered. Someone had searched for something. Recently. I was about to leave when my eyes stopped on a picture frame face down. I picked it up. Behind it, taped to the back panel of wood, was a thin envelope marked, "Clara, if everything's gone." Hands trembling, I opened it. A second original copy of the will, notarized and signed by Grandpa and 2 independent witnesses. And a letter. Clara, they may erase everything in this room, but they can't erase you from the truth. That night, as I left the property, a text came in. From my mother's number. "We know where you are. If you trespass again, don't blame us for your ruined reputation." I laughed out loud. Reputation? They kicked me out, changed the gate codes, and still had the nerve to say I was unstable. Last week, they sent a legal letter from the family's law firm, claiming Grandpa had shown serious signs of delusion near the end, and that any mention of Clara taking over the company was purely imagined. I tried calling the Lexington Timber Group general line the next day. The receptionist's voice was icy. "There is no Clara Denton listed in our staff or board of directors. Please contact legal." I'd been erased. Not just from the house, but from the very system I was born into. Then came the final blow. Jenna, the woman who had taken me in, was called into her building's management office. "There's been a complaint from the landlord. They want to review the lease terms. We're sorry, but you can't have guests for over 10 days. I understood. They found out where I was. They pressured Jenna. Not with threats, but with policies. With invisible power. I packed my things, hugged Jenna tight, thanked her for standing by me this long. I didn't blame her. Because I knew. They weren't going to stop. They wanted me hopeless. They wanted me gone. The morning after leaving Jenna's apartment, I sat alone in a small cafe on the south side of the city, an old laptop on loan from Mr. Richard, open in front of me. Harold's USB was plugged into the side, its red light blinking. Inside was a labyrinth of data, layers upon layers of evidence, notes, video clips, and encrypted files. I had reviewed most of it with Mr. Richard, but this time I noticed a folder I hadn't opened before. Legacy_raw. I typed the password 3 times. My grandfather's real name, his birth year, and his favorite phrase he used to repeat to me. "The wind doesn't decide where you go. You do." The screen lit up. A video started playing. Harold sat before the camera, thin but sharp, his eyes carrying that same stern look I'd seen when he once shut down a bad investment plan during a board meeting. "Clara," he began, voice slow and clear. "If you're watching this, then everything I feared has become reality." I couldn't blink. He was looking straight into the lens, as if speaking to me in the present. "I've stored all the documents you need to prove my mental capacity at the time the will was signed, all medical evaluations. From Dr. Jonas, who's been monitoring me for the past 4 years, are in the folder, medical_official. There are even audio recordings of my cognitive assessments. No one can deny my legal capacity unless they commit fraud." His tone dropped. "Gregory Phillips, my former attorney, may have been bribed. I suspect he'll cooperate if Rebecca and Dennis attempt to meddle with the will. If that happens, go to Lawrence Greer, the co-founder of Lexington Timber." I looked up. Lawrence Greer? I thought he'd retired from the industry long ago. "Lawrence is the only one I trust outside of Richard," Harold continued. "And he's overseeing part of the assets I kept off the books." The screen went black for a few seconds, then switched to a shot of him holding a black envelope. Inside this envelope are login credentials for 3 bank accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. The total is $2 million. No one but you knows they exist. Use that money to fight, Clara. Don't let them corner you. And don't fall into the trap of revenge. You don't need to destroy them. You only need to win." I froze. In the quiet cafe, only the fan whirred steadily. What I now held. This video, the medical evaluations, audio recordings of past board meetings, and now, secret financial accounts, was no longer just evidence. This was the foundation of a full-blown counterattack. I called Mr. Richard. "Richard, do you know where Mr. Lawrence Greer is right now?" I asked, still scrolling through the files. A pause. "Lawrence moved to the Charlottesville area in Virginia. He's been off the radar since selling his final shares. But I do have his number." "Clara, are you sure? Lawrence is notoriously private." "Grandpa mentioned him in the video," I said. "He'll understand." 3 hours later I had a meeting scheduled. Mr. Lawrence welcomed me into his cabin, nestled in the Blue Ridge Hills. He was nearly 70, white-haired, his features sharp like a man who'd never truly left the boardroom. "You look like Harold," he said, skipping any pleasantries. "The eyes, the stance." I said nothing, just handed him the USB. He watched the entire video, never once interrupting. When the screen finally went black, he sat still for several minutes before speaking. He was right. Gregory's an opportunist, and Dennis, he always resented Harold for bringing you onto the junior advisory board. I once overheard him tell Brooke, "Once the old man dies, everything goes to the ones who actually deserve it." I looked at him, eyes unwavering. "Are you willing to help me?" He nodded. "I'm not doing this for legacy. But I owe Harold. And I won't stand by and watch them tear apart the company we spent nearly 3 decades building." He pulled an envelope from a small safe hidden behind a painting. "This is a copy of the company's founding charter, with a clause Harold secretly added in his final year. Any transfer of ownership must be approved by the Ethics Oversight Board. A panel of 3, me, Mrs. Martha Jenkins, the former chief accountant, and Mr. Bruce Lanning, an independent auditor." I went numb. My family had no idea this existed. "Clara," he said, voice deeper now. You don't have to destroy them, just expose the truth, and with everything you have, trust me, the truth will take care of the rest. End of chapter 11. I gripped the armrest, knowing once again I was no longer the daughter, dragged out of her home in the rain. 3 days after meeting with Mr. Lawrence, I sat in attorney Benjamin Stokes's office in downtown Nashville. The office was small, discreet, and incredibly quiet. No flashy signs, no elaborate reception. Just a small brass plaque by the door engraved in classic lettering. B. Stokes, Estate and Ethics Law. Benjamin was in his early 60s, tall and lean, speaking slowly but with pinpoint precision. During 3 uninterrupted hours of work, he didn't take his eyes off the screen once. He read through every email between my father and Gregory Phillips, listened to each audio recording, rewatched the video Mr. Harold had recorded before he passed. At the end of the session, he pushed back his chair, crossed his arms, and looked at me. Miss Clara, with this amount of evidence, we're not just looking at an inheritance dispute. This could involve financial fraud, falsification of medical records, and possibly even money laundering. I nodded, my heart was racing. Would you represent me? Benjamin smiled. I've turned down offers from 7 major corporations over the past 2 years. But I owe Harold. And I've never seen someone this betrayed, still standing tall. The counterattack plan began from 2 fronts, legal and quiet media pressure. On the legal side, Benjamin drafted a civil lawsuit targeting 3 individuals: Dennis Denton, my father, Rebecca Denton, my mother, and Gregory Phillips, our former family attorney. In the filing, he outlined allegations of forgery of testamentary documents, abuse of financial authority under guardianship, illegal asset transfers during pending probate. Meanwhile, I began working with Marcus Wynn, a private investigator introduced by Mr. Lawrence. Marcus had been a federal investigator who retired early after refusing to cover up a government corruption case. When I asked why he took this case, he simply said, "I hate people who use bloodlines to mask their crimes." Marcus had a rare skill, tracking money trails. And he uncovered something that made even Benjamin frown. From a Lexington Timber corporate account, $98,000 had been wired to a casino hotel in Reno, Nevada. Exactly 1 week after Brooks' credit card was hacked, as my mother had claimed to the press. Marcus tapped the screen of his laptop. This transfer is marked as expense reimbursement. Reimbursement for what? At a casino? I asked, my throat dry. Could be debt, or hush money, Marcus said without flinching. And that wasn't all. He'd discovered a string of suspicious transactions. My father had used a company's name to purchase a house in Orlando, registered under a shell corporation. The current occupant? A woman named Angela Holt. The same name as my mother's longtime friend, who once borrowed $50,000 for a community arts project no one ever heard of. Benjamin, on his end, found something else. Gregory Phillips had submitted a recently updated will to the local court, claiming Mr. Harold wanted all assets divided equally due to mental health instability. But the timestamp on that document? 3 weeks after my grandfather's death. And the printer that produced it? Registered to Gregory's office. If we handle this right, Benjamin said in a strategy meeting, we might not just win. We might see at least one of them face criminal charges. I chose not to go public. Everything stayed under the radar. But I wasn't alone. Mr. Richard became the communications hub. Marcus kept tracing fraudulent investments. Benjamin strategized the legal path like a chessboard. And Mr. Lawrence was quietly rallying the ethics oversight board he and Harold had once built, a board with the authority to veto any Lexington Timber asset transaction upon evidence of misconduct. One rainy night, I sat alone on Mr. Richard's balcony, overlooking the swaying barley fields. I thought of the moment my father dragged me out by my hair. Brooks' triumphant smile. My mother saying I was a burden. The morning of the first hearing, the sky over Nashville was a heavy gray, almost mirroring what I felt inside, calm on the surface, churning beneath. I stepped out of Mr. Richards' car in front of the Davidson County Courthouse, wearing a charcoal suit my grandmother once left to my mother. I had it tailored to fit my shape. My hair was neatly combed and tied low, covering the small scar on my temple, the result of my father's shove last month. Across the steps, my parents and Brooke stood beside Gregory Phillips and 3 attorneys from the city's most prestigious law firm. They looked like they were headed to a gala, not a contested probate trial. My mother wore Chanel sunglasses, pretending not to see me. My father turned away the moment our eyes met. Brooke smirked, just enough for me to notice. But this time, I wasn't Clara, being dragged through the rain. I was Clara Denton, the rightful heir to Lexington Timber, and I was here to reclaim everything that had been stolen. As plaintiff, I presented 3 main allegations: will forgery, abuse of fiduciary authority, and deliberate obstruction of legal heir access to estate assets. The defendants, my parents, Brooke and Gregory, flatly denied all charges, claiming Mr. Harold was no longer mentally competent when signing the will and that he was manipulated by Clara in his final days. Judge Eva Ree Rollins, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a reputation for cutting through courtroom theatrics, presided over the case. From her opening remarks, she made her stance clear. We are not here to rule on emotions, we rule on evidence. And that's exactly what we had. Benjamin began with a 21-minute video Mr. Harold had recorded 1 month before his death. His image appeared on the courtroom screen, frail, yes, but eyes sharp, hands slightly trembling, voice firm. In the video he stated clearly, I, Harold Denton, in a sound and lucid state of mind, leave all operational shares of Lexington Timber and the Bell River Estate to my granddaughter, Clara Denton. I have a specific reason: her capability, her integrity, and her commitment to this legacy. When he spoke my father's name, Dennis, my father's face froze. Mr. Harold called him financially reckless and more concerned with social standing than ethics. About my mother he simply said, chooses silence to preserve peace, even when it harms the company. As for Brooke, his tone was gentle but firm. I love her like my own, but I can't entrust a legacy to someone who's never held a job longer than 3 months. Next came the testimony of Dr. Jonas, Mr. Harold's physician for the final 3 years of his life. He presented medical records, cognitive evaluations, and footage from his final interview, recorded by Mr. Richard. Mr. Harold was fully competent, Dr. Jonas emphasized. He knew exactly what he was doing. I signed off on it, not because he was my patient, but because it was true. Then came Martha Jenkins, Mr. Harold's former assistant. Her hair silver and neatly tied back, her eyes steady. I was there when Mr. Harold signed the will, she said. No pressure, no doubt in his clarity. And I saw him cry when he said, I hope Clara won't need the law to prove what's right. Then the most unexpected witness. Peterson, our family's housekeeper of over 25 years. He wore an old suit, but his eyes didn't flinch. I saw Mr. Dennis drag Miss Clara out of the house. I heard Mrs. Rebecca say, as long as she's gone, everything can be sorted later. And I once overheard Gregory Phillips discuss with Mr. Dennis about drafting a more controllable version of the will. The courtroom fell silent. My father shut his eyes, my mother looked away. Gregory flushed, wiping sweat from his brow, though the room was cool. Finally, Benjamin wrapped up with a thick file containing financial records showing Brooke used company funds to cover gambling debts. Emails from Gregory to my father discussing how to soften the will's language. Handwritten journals from Mr. Harold, provided by Mr. Lawrence, in which he wrote, if I die, and Clara is shut out, the law must be her final refuge. I trust Clara. And I believe the truth will outlive any performance. 3 days later, the ruling came. Judge Rollins entered with a stern expression. Based on the evidence, consistent testimony, and verified legal documentation, she said. The court finds that the will, signed by Mr. Harold Denton, is valid and reflects his genuine intent. I held my breath. All inheritance rights and shares are hereby restored to Clara Denton. Furthermore, this court orders the immediate suspension of Mr. Dennis Denton and Mrs. Rebecca Denton from any executive role at Lexington Timber. Gregory Phillips will be referred to the State Bar for professional ethics review. I didn't cry. I simply stood, nodded at the judge, and turned to face them, my parents Brooke, Gregory, still frozen in their seats like stone statues. On a December morning, I returned to Lexington Timber Group, as mist still clung to the treetops outside the 19th floor window. When the elevator doors opened, no one looked at me like I didn't belong anymore. They knew who I was, and this time, no one could take that away. The CEO office remained unchanged, the old brown leather chair, the oak desk with worn corners from when Harold was still alive. But the nameplate on the desk had been replaced. Clara Denton, CEO. The first thing I did wasn't to hold a press conference, nor to launch the mass firings people had gossiped about. I simply called a meeting with accounting, legal, and senior HR. On the screen, I laid out a 6-month restructuring plan. Cut vanity expenses. Cancel all shady contracts signed under my father's leadership. And establish the Harold Denton Ethics Fund, an internal initiative to protect whistleblowers. Someone asked, "What about your family? Mr. Dennis, Mrs. Rebecca, do they still have any role?" I answered clearly, without hesitation. They are no longer affiliated with this company in any capacity and they never will be. That afternoon, I signed an order to reclaim all assets my parents had misappropriated from Lexington Timber. The Bell River estate was quietly listed through a trust. My mother sent an email. Her first contact since the trial. "Clara, I know there were mistakes. But I'm still your mother, at least let us talk. Not about assets, but about blood." I read it. And deleted it. Brooke was the only one I agreed to meet in person. She showed up 15 minutes late, dressed unusually plain, an old knit coat, flat shoes, no makeup, no posing. When she saw me waiting in the cafe corner, she hesitated. Like she expected to be turned away. "I don't expect forgiveness," Brooke began, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. "I just wanted to thank you for not suing me." I looked at her, the one who had trampled over me since childhood. But now, her eyes held no arrogance, only exhaustion and confusion. I didn't bring up the past. Not the stolen things, the slander, or the day she laughed, while my father dragged me out of the house. I simply asked, "What are you planning to do next?" She stayed silent for a long moment, then pulled out a folded paper. "A registration form for a financial recovery and trauma counseling program in Atlanta. My therapist said I should write a real apology," she said. "But I don't think you need to read it. I just wanted to show you. I'm trying to start over." I nodded, placed a folder on the table and slid it toward her. "Inside is a scholarship from Grandpa's fund. If you truly want change, this means you won't have to depend on anyone anymore." She frowned. "What's the catch?" she asked. "None," I said. "But there won't be a second chance." Brooke burst into tears. For the first time in my life I saw real tears from her. Months later, Lexington Timber reported rising profits again. But what made me prouder was this. 12 employees whom my father had once fired for being a poor cultural fit had been invited back, and 2 of them were now leading our most critical departments. I also finally purchased a small home on the east side of the city. A 2-story wooden house with a backyard full of lavender, just like Grandpa once dreamed for me. On the first anniversary of his passing, I visited his grave again. I placed a small wooden box in front of his headstone. Inside was the pocket watch he left me. I whispered, "You kept the time, I kept the promise." Later I received letters from my father, through their attorney, wanting to discuss reconciliation. They cited everything: age, health, family honor. I never replied. Forgiveness isn't a ticket back. It's just how I let go of hate so I could move forward. And to me, justice isn't about bringing the wicked down. It's about preserving what's worth keeping. Grandpa once taught me, strong isn't who gets revenge, strong is who doesn't let pain turn them into what hurt them. Now I understand. I don't need to prove anything anymore. I just need to live true to myself and let silence speak for me. Clara's story is clear proof that real family isn't built on blood, but on integrity and resilience. In real life, some people called relatives will trample you for greed. Speaking up, protecting yourself, and setting boundaries isn't betrayal. It's the first step toward healing. Sometimes, the greatest strength doesn't lie in revenge, but in standing firm, keeping your dignity through betrayal, and starting over on your own terms. What do you think about Clara's choices and her journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life stories about family and the lessons they leave behind.